My name is Saleem, and if you asked me today what the biggest mistake of my life was, I wouldn't need a second to answer. Ahmed. He was my son. A son who never raised his voice at me, never disobeyed me, and never demanded anything for himself. But I mistook his silence for strength. We also had a daughter, Ayesha, who was 4 years younger than Ahmed. She was the center of our world. If she laughed, the whole house felt alive. If she cried, it felt as though something terrible had happened. My wife and I always believed that because Ahmed was the older sibling, he could handle anything. Whenever Ayesha wanted one of his toys, we'd tell him, "Son, you're the big brother. Let her have it." If she insisted on going somewhere, Ahmed's choice was quietly ignored. Every single time, we told him the same thing. "You're mature. Make the sacrifice." What we never realized was that every sacrifice leaves a scar on a person's heart. Years passed. Ahmed never complained. He studied hard, earned excellent grades, helped around the house, and carried every responsibility without being asked. Deep down, I was proud of him, but I don't think I ever made him feel that. Then came the day that still keeps me awake at night. Ahmed's 18th birthday. For the first time, we decided to throw him a proper celebration. The house was decorated. A birthday cake was ordered. Our relatives were invited. I even went to the market myself and bought him a wristwatch as a gift. When he walked downstairs wearing his new suit, I looked at him and realized my little boy had become a man. I wanted to tell him how proud I was, but the words never came out. An hour before the party was supposed to begin, Ayesha walked out of her room in tears. My wife rushed over to her. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Through her tears, Ayesha said, "Everyone is here for Ahmed. Nobody cares about me. I feel like I don't even matter in this family." For a moment, I looked at Ahmed. He stood there in complete silence. Then I made the decision that would change my life forever. I took a deep breath and said, "Cancel the party." Ahmed stared at me in disbelief. "Dad, what?" I answered in a firm voice. "Your sister doesn't feel special enough. There won't be any celebration today." He looked at me for several long seconds. His eyes were filled with questions, with pain, but not with anger. Finally, he asked quietly, "So, my happiness doesn't matter?" And I gave him the same answer I had been giving him his entire life. "You're the older brother. Learn to make sacrifices." The words left my mouth so easily. What I didn't know was that one day, those exact words would become the greatest regret of my life. Ahmed didn't argue. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. Without saying another word, he turned around and walked upstairs to his room. I assumed he was upset. I thought he'd cool off and come back downstairs in a little while. What I didn't know was that he wasn't calming down. He was packing his bags. To be continued. At the time, I honestly believed Ahmed was just upset. I thought he'd stay angry for a few hours and then come back downstairs on his own. After all, that's what he had always done. We would deny him what he wanted. He would go quiet. And by the next day, he'd act as if nothing had happened. It never crossed my mind that maybe he stayed silent because he'd already accepted that no one in this house was ever going to listen to him. Meanwhile, my wife was calling our guests. "I'm so sorry, but we've had to cancel today's celebration." Some relatives sounded surprised. Others asked what had happened. She simply replied, "We've had a family emergency." I didn't tell anyone the truth either, because if I had, they probably would have asked me one simple question. How could a father cancel his own son's 18th birthday just because his daughter didn't feel special enough? But at that moment, I didn't regret my decision. I honestly believed I was being fair to both of my children. Ayesha had already stopped crying. She was sitting in front of the television, happily watching her favorite show as though nothing had happened. I remember thinking, at least she's happy now. What I failed to see was that the son whose happiness I had taken away was quietly slipping out of my life forever. About 30 minutes passed. I called upstairs. "Ahmed, come down. Dinner's ready." No answer. I called again. Still nothing. I walked upstairs and stopped outside his bedroom. The door was half open. I pushed it open. The room was empty. At first, I assumed he'd gone up to the roof. Then I looked at his closet. Several sets of clothes were missing. His school files were gone. On top of the bed lay a single folded piece of paper. My heart suddenly started pounding. With trembling hands, I picked it up. There were only a few lines written on it. Dad, you always told me that because I was the older brother, I needed to learn how to sacrifice. Today, I'm finally following your advice. Please accept the sacrifice of my presence as well. That was all. No accusations. No curses. No anger. No complaints. Just silence. For the first time, my hands began to shake. I ran downstairs. He's gone. My wife looked up calmly and said, he probably went to one of his friends' houses. He'll be back tonight. I tried to convince myself she was right. I wanted to believe it. But that night, Ahmed never came home. And I still had no idea that my son hadn't just walked out of the house. He had walked out of our lives. To be continued. That night, I must have looked at the clock 100 times. 9 o'clock, then 10, then 11. But Ahmed never came home. I kept telling myself he had gone to a friend's house to cool off. By morning, everything would be fine. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. But deep inside, a strange fear had already begun to grow. I called his cell phone. It was switched off. I called again, then a third time. Every call ended with the same recorded message. The number you are trying to reach is currently unavailable. My wife, Nadia, still didn't seem too worried. She said, casually, don't worry so much. Ahmed is a sensible boy. Once he calms down, he'll come back on his own. I nodded, but for some reason, my heart refused to believe her. I called several of his friends. None of them had seen him. I even called one of his college classmates. His answer was no different. Uncle, Ahmed hasn't even spoken to us for days. My anxiety kept growing. I grabbed my car keys and drove through the city, the park where he sometimes liked to sit, alone, the small tea shop where he met his friends, the bus station, the railway station. I searched everywhere I could think of, but Ahmed was nowhere to be found. It was nearly 2 in the morning when I finally returned home, exhausted. As soon as I walked inside, my eyes fell on a framed photograph hanging on the wall. It was a picture from Ahmed's 10th birthday. He was smiling. Then, all at once, I remembered something I'd completely forgotten. Even on that birthday, Ayesha had been the one to cut the cake first because she'd thrown a tantrum. I slowly sat down. One memory after another flooded my mind. The day Ahmed wanted a bicycle, and we gave it to Ayesha instead. The time he wanted to join a cricket academy, but we spent the money on Ayesha's dance classes. The day he finished first in school, and neither of us attended the award ceremony because we were at one of Ayesha's friends' birthday parties. Back then, none of those moments had seemed important. But now, for the first time, I realized they weren't small incidents. They were wounds. Wounds that had been collecting in my son's heart for years. Just then, Nadia sat down beside me. For the first time, I saw real fear on her face. In a trembling voice, she asked, What if he really doesn't come back? I answered without hesitation, he will. But I wasn't saying it because I believed it. I was saying it because I needed her to believe it. Deep down, for the very first time, I realized I might have lost my son forever. And I didn't even know where he was, whether he was safe, whether he'd had anything to eat, or whether he was completely alone. That night, I didn't sleep. I prayed over and over again. God, please bring my son back just one more time. If you do, I'll make everything right. But some prayers are offered far too late. The morning after Ahmed left, I went straight to the police station. The duty officer listened carefully to everything I had to say before asking, How old is your son? I answered quietly, He turned 18 yesterday. The officer set his pen down on the desk and said, If he left on his own and he's legally an adult, we can't force him to come back. We can file a missing person report, but if he chose to leave, there's only so much we can do. His words hit me like another blow. For the first time, I realized my son wasn't a child anymore. He had every right to make his own decisions. I quietly filed the report and drove back home. The house felt unbearably silent. Just one day earlier, it had been filled with decorations, balloons, and plans for a birthday celebration. Now it felt empty. 4 plates had been set on the dining table. Nadia picked up 3 of them. The 4th one, Ahmed's. She left exactly where it was. Softly, she whispered, "I wonder if he's even had anything to eat." I didn't answer, because I didn't have one. Just then, Ayesha walked out of her room. She looked around and asked, "Has Ahmed still not come back?" "No," I replied. She shrugged and said without much concern, "He'll be back. He always comes back." Her words pierced my heart, because she wasn't wrong. Ahmed always came back. Every time we disappointed him, every time we broke his heart, he silently forgave us. But this time, we had pushed him beyond his limit. That evening, I walked into Ahmed's room. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. His books were neatly arranged on the desk. His medals still hung on the wall. I stood there, staring at them one by one. A mathematics competition, a public speaking championship, a cricket tournament. I was shocked. I couldn't even remember half of them. I had never taken the time to learn what my own son was good at. Then my eyes fell on the desk drawer. I pulled it open. Inside was a thick notebook. It was Ahmed's personal diary. For several moments, I simply held it in my hands. Part of me knew I shouldn't read something so private. But another part of me, the part that was finally trying to understand my son, needed to know what had been hidden in his heart all these years. Slowly, I opened the first page. The date at the top read, 6 years earlier. Beneath it was a single sentence. "Today Dad told me again that because I'm the older brother, I have to sacrifice. Sometimes I wonder, am I really his son, or just another responsibility?" My hands began to tremble. I turned the page, then another, and another. Every page held a pain I had never noticed, a disappointment I had never seen, a wound I had never cared to heal. And, in that moment, I finally understood something that shattered me. Ahmed hadn't left us overnight. We had been losing him, little by little. For years, I sat there for what felt like hours, holding Ahmed's diary in my hands. My fingers trembled. Part of me wanted to close it and put it back where I had found it. But as a father, I knew this might be my last chance to truly understand my son. I turned the next page. The entry was dated about 5 years earlier. It read, "Today I received the Student of the Year award at school. Every other student's parents were there. I kept looking toward the door, hoping Dad would walk in, hoping Mom would walk in, but the ceremony ended and the 2 seats beside mine stayed empty. When I got home, Mom only asked, 'Did you eat?' Nobody even asked what had happened at school today." The diary nearly slipped from my hands. I remembered that day. I really hadn't gone to his awards ceremony. But it wasn't because I was busy at work. I had taken Ayesha to her favorite shopping mall because she wanted new clothes. At the time, I told myself Ahmed was mature. He would understand. He wouldn't mind. For the first time, I realized how wrong I had been. He had minded. He had simply never let us see it. I turned another page. Another short entry stared back at me. "Today Dad said I'll be the one who carries this family someday." Funny. Whenever it's time to carry responsibility, I'm the oldest. But whenever it's time to receive love, I somehow become the smallest. A tear rolled down my cheek. For the first time in years, I saw myself through my son's eyes. And I hated the man I saw. Just then, Nadia walked into the room. She stopped the moment she noticed the tears on my face. "What happened?" she asked softly. Without saying a word, I handed her the diary. She sat beside me and began reading. Within minutes, tears filled her eyes as well. In a trembling voice, she whispered, Did Ahmed really carry all this pain by himself?" I lowered my head. Yes, and neither of us ever realized it. A heavy silence filled the room. Finally, Nadia looked at me and said, "We have to bring him home, no matter where he is." For the first time, I answered without hesitation, "I will find my son." The next morning, I didn't go to work. Instead, I gathered Ahmed's most recent photographs, collected every piece of information I could find, and made one decision. I was going to search for him. I didn't know what city he was in. I didn't know what kind of life he was living. I didn't even know if he was safe. But one thing was certain. This time, I was finally going to act like the father I should have been all along, even if it took me the rest of my life. What I didn't know was that Ahmed hadn't just left home. He had decided to leave his old identity behind as well. A full month had passed since Ahmed walked out of our home. Every morning, I woke up with the same hope. Maybe today the doorbell will ring. Maybe today Ahmed will come home. But every evening, that hope faded a little more. I spoke to every friend he had. I called relatives. I visited his college. I even went to the places where he used to spend time as a child. Everywhere I went, I heard the same answer. We don't know where Ahmed is. The atmosphere at home had changed too. Ayesha, who had once insisted on getting her way in everything, had become unusually quiet. Perhaps she had finally realized that one sentence she spoke had stolen all the happiness from our home. One morning, I was sitting silently at the breakfast table when the doorbell rang. I jumped to my feet. My heart pounded against my chest. Only one thought crossed my mind. Ahmed is home. I hurried to the door and pulled it open. But it wasn't Ahmed. It was the mailman. Mr. Saleem? Yes. He handed me a plain white envelope. There was no return address. No sender's name. Only my name was written on the front. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a single letter. The moment I recognized the handwriting, my eyes filled with tears. It was Ahmed's. I began reading immediately. Dad, if you're reading this letter, it means I'm alive. And I'm safe. Please don't worry about me. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm finally breathing on my own. I don't hate you. I don't think I ever could. You're my father. But I can't go back to a home where my happiness was always considered less important than someone else's. I've forgiven you, but I don't want to live that life again. Please don't try to find me. I need to build my own identity. And if one day I become successful, let the credit go to my hard work, not to the pain that forced me to leave home. Take care of yourself. Your son, Ahmed. By the time I reached the last line, my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I slowly sank into a chair. Nadia walked over to me. What did he say? Without speaking, I handed her the letter. She read it quietly. With every line, more tears rolled down her face. When she finished, she pressed the letter against her chest and whispered through her sobs. We've lost our son, Saleem. For the first time, I admitted the truth out loud. No, Nadia. Ahmed didn't leave us. We pushed him away with our own hands. At that very moment, my phone rang. A name appeared on the screen. Farouk, attorney-at-law. He was the same lawyer who had handled all of my late father's legal affairs for years. I had no idea that after this phone call, I was about to learn a secret about Ahmed, one that would change the course of my life forever. I answered the phone immediately. Hello, Mr. Farouk. His calm voice came through the receiver. Hello, Saleem. I need to meet with you. It's important. A knot formed in my stomach. Is everything all right? He was silent for a moment before replying. This isn't something we should discuss over the phone. If possible, I'd like you to come to my office today. There was a seriousness in his voice that I had never heard before. I didn't waste a single minute. About an hour later, I was sitting across from him in his office. Mr. Farouk opened a desk drawer and placed a thick file in front of me. My late father's name was written across the cover. My heartbeat quickened. Is this my father's file? He nodded slowly. Yes. Your father gave this to me just a few days before he passed away. I stared at him in disbelief. But he never mentioned any of this. Mr. Farouk let out a deep sigh, because he gave me very specific instructions. I leaned forward. What instructions? He looked me straight in the eye. I was only to give you this file if Ahmed ever left home. It felt as though the room had gone silent. What? Yes, Saleem. He spoke gently. Years ago, your father realized that if things continued the way they were, one day Ahmed would quietly walk away. I could hardly breathe. How could he have known that? Without saying a word, Mr. Farouk opened the file. Inside was a handwritten letter. It was my father's handwriting. With trembling hands, I unfolded it and began to read. Saleem, if you're reading this letter, then the day I feared has finally arrived. Ahmed has left home. I tried many times to tell you to love both of your children equally, but you always mistook Ahmed's silence for acceptance. Never forget this. The children who complain the least are often the ones who are hurting the most. If Ahmed is gone, the fault isn't his. It's yours. And as a father, it's time for you to face the consequences of your own choices. By the time I reached the end of the letter, tears were streaming down my face. Memories came rushing back. My father had defended Ahmed countless times. He used to tell me, "Son, don't always expect the oldest child to sacrifice everything." And every single time, I had answered the same way. "Don't worry, Dad. Ahmed understands." Only now did I realize how terribly wrong I had been. I looked up at Mr. Farouk. "So, that's all." He slowly shook his head. "No, Saleem." Then he reached back into the file and pulled out a sealed envelope. Only one name was written on it. Ahmed. I stared at it in confusion. "What is this?" Mr. Farouk answered quietly. "Your father left this for Ahmed." He paused before adding, "And there's also a legal document that can only be handed to Ahmed himself." I frowned. "What's inside?" He folded his hands together. "You'll find out, if Ahmed is ever found." I sat there in complete silence. For the first time, I realized my father had left something behind for his grandson. Something so important that even I had never known it existed. As I walked out of Mr. Farouk's office, I wasn't just carrying an envelope. I was carrying the last piece of hope I had left. I made a promise to myself. No matter how many years it took, I would find Ahmed. But life doesn't always follow the plans we make. 1 month passed, then 6 months, then a full year. There was still no sign of Ahmed. I hired private investigators. I sent inquiries to different cities. I stayed in touch with his old college friends. But every search ended with the same answer. It's as if Ahmed vanished into thin air. Time kept moving forward. Before I knew it, 5 years had passed. During those years, everything changed. My business, once considered one of the most successful in the city, began falling apart. Longtime clients signed contracts with other companies. My debts kept growing. For the first time in my life, I realized that nothing stays the same forever. Then there was Ayesha, the daughter for whom we had sacrificed everything. As soon as she found a good job, she decided to move to another city. A few months later, she insisted on moving abroad. I tried to stop her. She looked at me and said, "Dad, I have my own life too. I can't stay with you and Mom forever." Then she left. What hurt the most wasn't that she moved away. It was that she never once asked how her mother and I would manage without her. The very daughter, for whom I had broken my son's heart, had now left us completely alone. That night, I sat in the yard for hours. The breeze felt exactly the same as it had on Ahmed's 18th birthday. Only one thing had changed. That night, my son had still been under my roof. Now, only his memories remained. The next morning, I arrived at my office. A few minutes later, my longtime manager, Javed, rushed into my room carrying a business magazine. He looked unusually excited. "Sir, you need to see this." Without much interest, I took the magazine from him. Then I froze. On the front cover was a photograph of a young entrepreneur wearing a black suit. He stood confidently, smiling at the camera. The headline beneath the picture read, "Pakistan's fastest rising young business leader, Ahmed Saleem, whose technology company achieved extraordinary success in just 3 years." My heart nearly stopped. I stared at the photograph. The same eyes, the same smile. Only now, the sadness was gone. In its place was confidence. Without realizing it, I stood up from my chair. Only one sentence escaped my lips. "That's my Ahmed." In that moment, I understood something that left me speechless. The son I had believed would never amount to anything after leaving home had gone out and built an entire world for himself. What I didn't know was that reaching him now would be harder than ever before. I read the magazine over and over again. Every line felt like another wound to my heart. Ahmed Saleem. He hadn't changed his name. He had only changed his destiny. The article included the name of his company, the address of its headquarters, and a short interview. I didn't waste a single moment. That same day, I called Mr. Farouk. Mr. Farouk. I found Ahmed. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then he said softly, "Thank God. Perhaps he's giving you one last chance to make things right." I grabbed my car keys and drove straight to the address. The closer I got to the building, the faster my heart began to beat. Only one question echoed in my mind. Would he even want to see me? About an hour later, I stood in front of a stunning glass office tower. The company's name was displayed across the top in large gold letters. Inside, employees moved through the lobby with quiet confidence, each focused on their work. I took a deep breath and walked toward the reception desk. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How may I help you?" I hesitated before answering. I'd like to see Mr. Ahmed." She checked her computer. "Do you have an appointment?" I swallowed hard. "No, but please tell him his father is here." The expression on her face changed immediately. She picked up the phone and quietly spoke to someone upstairs. A moment later, she looked back at me. "Please have a seat, sir. Someone will be with you shortly." I sat down in the lobby. My heart pounded like I was waiting for the most important result of my life. A few minutes later, a young man in a black suit walked toward me. "Good afternoon, Mr. Saleem." "Good afternoon. I'm Mr. Ahmed's personal assistant." I stood up immediately. Will Ahmed see me?" The assistant paused before answering. "The moment Mr. Ahmed heard your name, he knew exactly who you were." A spark of hope lit up inside me. Then the next sentence crushed it. "I'm sorry, sir," the assistant said gently. "Mr. Ahmed has decided that he cannot meet with you today." My legs felt too heavy to move. I struggled to speak. "Please, just 5 minutes. I only want to apologize to my son." The assistant lowered his head. "Sir, he asked me to give you a message." I looked at him anxiously. He spoke quietly. "Please tell my father, the day I needed him most, he wasn't there for me. Today, he needs me, but I can't go back to the past." The words shattered me. Tears filled my eyes. I couldn't find the strength to say anything. Silently, I turned around and walked out of my son's company with the heaviest heart I had ever carried. What I didn't know was that on the 10th floor, standing silently behind the window of his office, Ahmed was watching me walk away. I walked out of the company building, but my feet refused to carry me any farther. I stopped and looked up one last time. The tall glass tower shimmered in the afternoon sunlight. Somewhere behind those windows, my son was there. But the distance between us wasn't measured in floors or walls. It was measured in 5 years, in my mistakes, and in the trust one had broken. I took a deep breath and started walking back toward my car. Then I heard someone calling behind me. "Mr. Saleem." I turned around. It was Ahmed's personal assistant, hurrying toward me. When he reached me, he smiled gently. "Sir, Mr. Ahmed has changed his mind." My heart skipped a beat. "What?" "He's willing to meet with you. For 10 minutes. Tears instantly filled my eyes. Without saying a word, I followed him back inside the building. The elevator stopped on the 10th floor. The doors opened to a modern, elegant office. A young man stood by the window, looking out over the city. Slowly, he turned around. It was Ahmed. The quiet, heartbroken boy who had left home 5 years earlier was gone. Standing before me now was a confident man. For several long moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. "Peace be upon you, son," he answered quietly. "And peace be upon you." I took one hesitant step toward him. "Ahmed, I've come to apologize." He looked directly into my eyes. "For what, Dad?" I lowered my head. "For every moment I ignored you. For every time I sacrificed your happiness for someone else's. And most of all, for your 18th birthday." The room fell silent. Ahmed slowly sat down in his chair. After a long pause, he spoke softly. Dad, I forgave you a long time ago. I looked up in surprise. Then why didn't you ever come back? A faint smile crossed his face. Because forgiving someone and going back to the life that broke you are two completely different things. His words went straight through me. He was right. Without another word, Ahmed opened a desk drawer. He carefully took out an old birthday candle. It was slightly bent and never used. He placed it gently on the desk. This, he said quietly, is the candle from the birthday cake that was bought for my 18th birthday. The candle that was never lit. I couldn't stop the tears. I couldn't even speak. Ahmed looked at the candle for a moment before saying, I kept it all these years to remind myself that people only learn their true worth when they finally choose to value themselves. With trembling hands, I reached out and held his. My son, can you give me one chance? I can't change the past, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to become the father you deserved. Ahmed remained silent for a long time. Then, for the first time in 5 years, he held my hand tightly. On one condition. I looked at him. Anything. He smiled sadly. Never tell another child. You're the older one. Learn to sacrifice. Because some sacrifices don't strengthen families. They destroy them forever. I lowered my head. I promise. In that moment, I knew I hadn't truly gotten my son back. Not completely, but perhaps I had finally been given one last chance to become the father I should have been all along. The end.